Hello, I'm Simon Whistler, you're watching TopTenzNet, and in the video today we're looking at the top 10 thrilling facts about Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson was a man known for many things, including his music, his pelvic-centric dance moves, and the fact he was able to wear a fedora without looking like an idiot. But a man as unique as the King of Pop could never be summed up with a list of just 3 things, so here's a list of 10, starting with... Number 10. He personally leaked some of the more bizarre stories about himself. Jackson, in stark contrast with the innocent, childlike persona he adopted in public, was a calculating and efficient self-promoter behind the scenes. For example, he is known to have leaked several stories about himself to the press to ensure he continued to receive column inches in the world's papers when he wasn't actively making music. Stories known to have been planted by Jackson himself include the one about him sleeping in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber to make himself look younger, as well as the news that he'd made a bid to purchase the skeleton of John Merrick, better known as the Elephant Man, and the fact that he shared his bathroom with his pet monkey, Bubbles. While these stories undoubtedly gave Jackson unprecedented levels of media coverage, it eventually backfired when the press simply began making stuff up themselves. When the British media began referring to Jackson as Wacko Jacko, he made the conscious and probably wise decision to stop leaking false stories to the news about his personal life. Number 9. He wrote all of his songs with his voice. Despite being credited as the sole writer on virtually his entire discography and having a hand in the composition of much of the music to his back catalogue of hits, Michael Jackson, rather surprisingly, had little affinity for music. By this we mean that although Jackson understood how to compose a song, he could neither play an instrument nor read sheet music. To get around this, Jackson would instead compose his songs entirely in his head and then sing them to session musicians while recording his albums. To this end, Jackson carried around a tape recorder with him at all times, and when inspiration struck, whether it be a musical hook or a guitar riff, he'd sing it into the recorder, or in the event of a bass line, beatbox it. Jackson would then layer all of these elements together to create what amounted to a cappella versions of his songs. Notoriously secretive, few examples of these recordings exist, with there being, to our knowledge at least, only a single recording of Beat It in which you can hear Jackson demonstrate this. He also demonstrated the techniques in court to shut down a plagiarism suit. As an example of just how talented Jackson was at emulating the sounds of different instruments, musicians who worked with him reported that he could sing chords and layer his voice skillfully enough to eerily replicate an entire string section. Number 8. He was an actual king. For a guy known worldwide as the King of Pop, it's kind of weird that few people ever talk about that time in 1992 when Michael Jackson actually became a real king. You see, in the early 90s, Jackson embarked on a tour of Africa, during which he encountered a small kingdom on the Ivory Coast called Sanwi. The people of Sanwi were enamored with Jackson, and the tribal chief told him that the mystics had foretold that the singer was actually a direct descendant of the Sauri royal bloodline. So, in a small but nonetheless extravagant ceremony, the nation crowned Jackson king, an official title he had to sign papers to confirm, and even allowed him to sit in a golden throne set aside for royalty. Jackson's official title was later reduced to Crown Prince, and his kingly duties were taken up by another man, but he was, for all intents and purposes, considered genuine royalty from that point on. Sanwi even held a royal funeral for him and declared 2 days of mourning when he died. As for why you've probably never heard this, Jackson simply never talked about it. In an interview with Ebony magazine in 1992, Jackson was humble about his newfound status as a king, telling an interviewer how it felt to be a real king, saying, "I never try to think hard about it." Number 7. He earns more money dead than we will alive. Now, you'd think that being dead would, for most people, put an end to their ability to make money. Employers are notoriously picky when it comes to hiring people who aren't alive. Michael Jackson is an apparent exception to this rule, being recognized as the highest earning dead celebrity, earning close to $1 billion in 2016, more than 7 years after his death. Jackson's ability to earn unbelievably fat stacks of cash despite the normally insurmountable hurdle of being dead is mainly mainly due to sales and licensing of the vast catalogues of music he owns. Along with his estate owning the rights to his own hits and albums, which continue to make millions, Jackson also bought the rights to his favorite songs during his lifetime. This meant that he earned money when people bought those albums too. Most famously, he bought the rights to the Beatles albums in 1985, though Sony has since fully acquired ownership, including Jackson's remaining 50% stake last year. We don't know if that's smart or just selfish, but either way, we're mad impressed that a skeleton earns more than us thanks to business decisions it made a decade ago. Speaking of Jackson's skeleton, number 6, his death broke Google. Like the moon landing and losing your virginity, the death of Michael Jackson is an event where you remember exactly where you were when it happened. It was a global event that resulted in an almost immediate outpouring of grief. We say almost, of course, because people had to check Google to make sure the news was accurate. That's not us being facetious, by the way. According to stats released by Google themselves, minutes after news of the singer's death broke, so many millions of people tried to search his name that it brought the monolithic website to its knees. Yes, Michael Jackson's death caused so many people to panic and Google his name that it broke Google. Then again, this is hardly surprising given that a few months before his death, news of him touring again caused. Number 5, people scalped his tickets that didn't exist yet for hundreds of dollars on eBay. News of Michael Jackson's death was particularly shocking because it occurred just weeks before he was due to embark on what he insisted was his last ever set of concerts at the London O2 Arena. The aptly named This Is It concert was said to be the singer's last hurrah and consisted of 50 straight sold-out shows at the same venue with people flocking from across the world to see it. Initially, the concert only had 10 shows booked, but the instantaneous selling out of tickets and tidal wave of complaints the venue received for not having enough prompted Jackson to schedule 40 more, all of which, again, sold out minutes after the tickets went live. Demand for tickets was such that Jackson's official website offered fans a chance to enter a pre-sale draw, essentially securing them a chance to purchase a ticket ahead of time so they wouldn't have to sit on the ticket website the day they went live. The offer crashed the website, with a reported 16,000 people trying to apply for the draw every second. This happened for several hours. This unprecedented level of enthusiasm saw people who managed to secure a place in the pre-sale draw able to sell their tickets, which didn't yet exist, on eBay for upwards of $500 a piece. Then again, it's not surprising people were so keen to see Jackson perform, considering he once, number 4, danced the moonwalk so hard Fred Astaire called to congratulate him. Though he didn't necessarily invent the moonwalk, the genesis of the move is traced back to dancer Cab Calloway and is thought to have been perfected by mime Marcel Marceau. He is arguably the person who showed the world just how cool it could look to see a man effortlessly glide backwards like he was just pushed onto a greased air hockey table. Jackson reportedly learned the move from a pair of dancers named Casper Candidate and Cooley Jackson. He had seen these dancers perform it on the show Soul Train while sporting dangerously awesome afros. Jackson perfected the dance move and debuted his enhanced version at Motown 25 to a visibly and audibly shocked crowd. Sitting at home watching the show was an 84-year-old Fred Astaire who, upon seeing Jackson glide across the stage, picked up his phone and called him to gush over how amazing it was. Jackson, a massive fan of Astaire's, fanboyed down the phone for several minutes before quickly rushing to a nearby bathroom and vomiting. Number 3. The glove was to hide a skin condition. Few artists have a look as well-defined and iconic as Michael Jackson's. Everything from his pimping fedora to his needlessly high socks have become ingrained in pop culture as integral parts of the Jackson mythos. Arguably, his singular most defining item of clothing, though, was his single glove. Custom made by the same guy who made the gloves for Kate Winslet in Titanic, Jackson sported many different styles of gloves over the years. While many assumed that the glove was simply for style, because it admittedly does look pretty fly, according to those close to Jackson, it was actually used to hide the early stages of vitiligo, a disease which causes the skin to change color and often starts with unsightly blotches on the hands and feet. While this became somewhat unnecessary in later years as Jackson's skin tone changed from a deep chocolate to a creamy mocha to that of anemic skim milk, the glove was nonetheless an important tool used by the singer to hide something that he felt self-conscious about. Number 2. He composed an unknown amount of the soundtrack for Sonic 3. Released in 1994, many fans of the Blue Hedgehog consider Sonic 3 to be one of the best games in the series, partly because it lets you play as Knuckles and partly because of the soundtrack. Well, for any fans of the game, you may be pleased to know that Michael Jackson had a hand in creating it, though exactly how much is hotly debated. The story goes that during development, Sega brought in Jackson to compose the soundtrack for the game, a move that was seen as being in no way weird in the 90s. Shortly after production on the game began, though, the first allegations of child abuse were leveled at Jackson, prompting Sega to distance themselves from the artist. Today, the company denies Jackson had anything to do with the game or its music. This doesn't exactly fit with other reports, though, which claim that Jackson had a direct hand in creating a number of tracks for the game, but ultimately became frustrated with the limited range of the sound chip in the Sega Genesis, leaving the project of his own volition. As a result, the extent of Jackson's involvement with Sonic 3 isn't clear, but for anyone curious, the songs often thought to be the ones most likely to have been composed by Jackson, at least in part, are Carnival Night Zone, Hydro City Zone, and Ice Cap Zone. Number 1. He promised to write a #1 single for Bart Simpson. Michael Jackson was a massive fan of The Simpsons, famously lending his voice to the episode Stark Raving Dad, which features a man who's delusional and thinks he's Michael Jackson, but is actually voiced by Michael Jackson. It's noted that Jackson personally reached out to the staff of the show to ask for a bit part and took his role extremely seriously, taking part in line readings with the rest of the cast and refusing to use a special trailer set aside for him. During his time with The Simpsons staff, Jackson explains to Matt Groening that Bart was his favorite character, and that he wanted to write the troublesome 10-year-old a #1 hit single. Groening laughed, assuming that Jackson was joking, but he wasn't joking. Jackson, true to his word, went home and composed the basic idea for the song Do the Bartman, a rap single from the point of view of Bart Simpson. Due to contractual obligations with his label at the time, Jackson had to remain uncredited as a composer, but went against his label stipulations and performed back vocals to the track because it's not like anyone else was going to believe the king of pop would slum it with the voice of a cartoon. Jackson, also seemingly just because he could, got Bart to name-drop him in the song he was singing for no apparent reason. Sadly for Jackson, the song never became a #1 hit in the US, only topping the charts in territories like Ireland, Australia, and New Zealand. But Jackson can take consolation in the fact that this was probably because it was never released as a single in the United States. So I really hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already for brand new videos just like this every day of the week. Also, over there on the right, a couple of other videos that you might enjoy if you enjoyed this one, and thank you for watching.